We just want to be heard before a controversial vote. Sir, this is wrong, and you know it. You are a person of integrity. How could you be doing this? At least have a vote on my point of order. Sir, with all appeals to your decency, with all appeals to your integrity, with all appeals to past jurisdiction and past precedent, why are you doing this? This is outrageous.
This is a kangaroo court. That's all we have here, Mr. Chairman.
This is wrong. To violate your own rules without going by the mandates of the parliamentarian. This is unbelievable.
Something just happened in Congress that has Donald Trump absolutely losing his mind and reveals cracks forming in his coalition that he cannot ignore. Democrats are walking out of his speeches, turning their backs mid-address, holding up signs calling him wannabe dictator, then leaving chamber entirely. Representatives Andrea Salinas and Maxine Dexter did exactly that during Trump's joint address to Congress. Just stood up, showed their opposition visually, and walked out while Trump was still speaking. That's not normal political disagreement. That's fundamental rejection of Trump's legitimacy happening on national stage, in front of cameras, in front of entire world, and it's happening more and more frequently as opposition to Trump's agenda intensifies inside building that matters most to his power. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Patrick Smith's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what's actually happening because these walkouts aren't isolated incidents. They're part of broader resistance taking shape in Congress that goes beyond symbolic gestures. Senate Democrats have been holding overnight floor protests, what they call talkathons, staying up all night to oppose Trump's nominees and policies. When Trump nominated Russ Vought for budget director, Democrats held floor all night protesting. Didn't have votes to actually stop nomination. Republicans still controlled chamber, but they wanted to make statement, put on record their opposition to what Trump trying to do, show their base they're fighting even when they know they'll lose vote. These protests matter because they signal opposition won't quietly accept Trump's agenda. They're going to make noise, force uncomfortable votes, make Republicans go on record defending things that might hurt them in midterms. Walkouts and protests are symbolic, but symbols matter enormously in politics. When members of Congress visibly reject president, when they turn backs and leave room, sends message that resonates far beyond Capitol. Share this video with everyone you know because tells public this president is so extreme that even basic norms of respect and decorum no longer apply. Gives permission to others to express own dissent. Creates images that travel around world. American lawmakers walking out on their own president because they find his words and actions intolerable. Trump understands power of symbols better than almost anyone. That's why these walkouts enrage him so much. Knows what they communicate, knows they make him look weak, knows they undermine claim to represent entire nation. And he cannot do anything to stop them. Cannot force Democrats to sit politely through speeches. Cannot prevent Republicans from quietly breaking with him when political pressure gets too intense. All he can do is rage and watch as resistance inside building continues growing. Because here's what should really worry Trump. It's not just Democrats anymore. Republicans starting to break too. Not in dramatic walkouts that make great television, but in ways that matter just as much. They're skipping votes, quietly distancing themselves from Trump's most controversial positions, voting with Democrats on key issues, overriding vetoes, blocking parts of his agenda. Washington Post reported on what they called legislative defections, days where Republicans join with Democrats to hand Trump defeats on things like war powers and healthcare policy. Think about what that represents. These aren't huge numbers yet. Republican coalition not collapsing overnight, but cracks are real and growing. And for someone like Trump who sees any dissent as betrayal, each defection is personal insult that demands retaliation. Problem is threatening Republicans who break with him only works if they're more afraid of him than of losing their own seats. And some are starting to calculate that being too closely tied to Trump might cost them more than it helps. Share this with everyone because defections aren't dramatic. Republicans not giving speeches denouncing Trump and switching parties. not holding press conferences to announce opposition. Instead, quietly breaking with Trump on specific votes when they think they can get away with it. Joining Democrats to override vetoes, voting against parts of agenda that are unpopular in their home states, skipping events where Trump's speaking, finding convenient excuses to be somewhere else. These individual acts of defiance might seem small, but they add up, signal something important. That Republican members of Congress calculating loyalty to Trump might cost them more than it helps them. First, defection is hardest. After that, there's precedent, there's cover, there's proof you can break with Trump and survive. And each time someone breaks, becomes little easier for others to follow. Analysts watching Congress closely say Republican divisions widening as 2026 midterms approach. Members worried about two things. First, worried about their own reelection. If Trump's approval ratings drop, if policies become unpopular, if voters in their district start turning against him, then being too closely associated with Trump becomes liability rather than asset. These members are professionals, know how to read polls and gauge mood of constituents, some starting to see warning signs that make them nervous about going all in on Trump. Second, worried about what happens if Democrats win back House. Trump himself has warned about this, telling Republicans if they lose midterms, he'll be impeached. That warning meant to motivate them to work harder for Republican candidates, but also reminds them of stakes. Democratic House means investigations, subpoenas, oversight hearings, almost certainly another impeachment. Some Republicans might be calculating they don't want to be too closely tied to president who could end up impeached for third time. Think about combination of Democratic resistance and Republican fractures. Creates environment where Trump's control of Washington more fragile than appears. Yes, Republicans still hold both chambers. Yes, Trump can still get most of agenda through. But margins are thin. Defections are real. Trend lines not moving in Trump's direction. Every walkout, every overnight protest, every quiet vote against Trump's wishes, all contributes to narrative of president losing grip. And narratives matter in politics. Shape how people perceive power, influence whether other actors think they can challenge president or whether they feel they have to go along. Right now, narrative is shifting. People starting to see Trump can be defied, and that makes future defiance more likely. Protests across country feed into this dynamic too. While Democrats walking out in Congress, protesters marching in streets against Trump and his agenda. These protests create pressure on members of Congress, show there's organized opposition, demonstrate people are paying attention and willing to take action, give political cover to members who want to break with Trump, allowing them to say they're responding to constituent concerns rather than just opposing president for partisan reasons. Inside game and outside game reinforce each other. Walkouts in Congress inspire protesters outside. Protests outside give permission for more defiance inside. Becomes feedback loop that erodes Trump's position bit by bit. Trump's response to all this has been predictable. Rage and threats. Attacks Republicans who break with him. Questions their loyalty. Warns about primary challenges. Tries to use fear to keep coalition together. And to some extent it works. Most Republicans still too scared of Trump's base to openly defy him on major issues. But fact that he has to keep making threats, keep reminding people of consequences, keep working so hard to maintain discipline, that itself is sign of weakness. President with true command of his party wouldn't need to constantly threaten own members. Threats reveal underlying fragility. When Trump lashes out at Republicans who break with him, when he questions loyalty and threatens primaries, he's revealing how precarious his position has become. President who truly controlled party wouldn't need those threats. President with secure power wouldn't be so triggered by handful of defections. Rage tells you Trump knows, even if he'd never admit it, that something has changed. That automatic deference he once commanded is eroding. That members are calculating own interests rather than just following his lead. Every angry statement about disloyal Republicans is admission that loyalty can no longer be taken for granted. And once that becomes clear, once people see defying Trump is possible and sometimes even beneficial, defections will accelerate. Think about what happens next. Next 10 months will be defined by this tension between Trump's desire for total control and growing willingness of people in Congress to defy him. We're going to see more walkouts, more overnight protests, more quiet defections on votes where members face cross pressures, and we're going to see Trump get angrier and angrier, making more threats, demanding more loyalty, trying desperately to hold coalition together through fear and intimidation. Some of it will work, most Republicans still too scared of Trump's base to openly break, but trend not in Trump's direction. Cracks are growing, resistance getting bolder, and midterms that will determine whether any of this actually matters are getting closer every day. Walkouts and defections telling us something important about this moment, telling us Trump's power, while still formidable, has limits becoming more visible, telling us fear that once kept everyone in line starting to fade for some members, telling us next Congress could look very different from this one, with implications for everything Trump wants to do and everything he wants to avoid. President who demands total loyalty facing Capitol, where loyalty increasingly conditional, where members calculating own survival, where automatic assumption Republicans will fall in line no longer holds. Trump is enraged by this, can see it in how he talks, can see it in how he treats members who break with him, can see it in his warnings about what happens if they lose midterms. That rage comes from place of fear, fear that thing he dreads most, accountability, might actually be coming, fear that coalition he built might not hold, fear that walkouts and defections he's seeing now might be just beginning of something much larger. Capitol not unified against Trump, not yet. But something is happening, something is shifting, protests are growing, defections accumulating, resistance organizing, and Trump, for all his bluster, for all his threats, for all his demands for loyalty, cannot stop it, can only rage against it, hope that rage is enough to hold things together until votes counted in November. Bottom line is this: Democrats are walking out of Trump's speeches, representatives turning their backs, holding signs, leaving chamber during joint address to Congress. That's visible rejection of Trump's legitimacy happening on national stage. Senate Democrats holding overnight floor protests opposing his nominees and agenda, making noise even when they lack votes to stop outcomes, forcing Republicans to go on record defending positions that might hurt them in midterms. But more significant than Democratic resistance is Republican defections. Members of Trump's own party quietly breaking with him on specific votes, joining Democrats to override vetoes, voting against parts of agenda unpopular in home states, skipping events where Trump's speaking. These aren't dramatic denunciations. They're calculated breaks that signal loyalty to Trump might cost members more than it helps. Washington Post reporting on legislative defections, days where Republicans join Democrats to hand Trump defeats, pattern of small breaks that add up, show Trump's grip not absolute, show limits to what members will swallow. Each defection makes next one easier, creates precedent and cover for others to follow. Republican divisions widening as midterms approach. Members worried about reelection, worried about being too closely tied to Trump if approval drops, worried about Democratic takeover, meaning investigations and possible impeachment. Combination of Democratic resistance and Republican fractures creates environment where Trump's control more fragile than appears, margins thin, defections real, trend lines not moving in his direction. Every walkout and protest and quiet defection contributes to narrative of president losing grip. Narratives matter, shape perceptions of power, influence whether others think they can challenge president. Right now, narrative shifting. People seeing Trump can be defied, makes future defiance more likely. Protests outside reinforce resistance inside, create pressure on members, give political cover for breaking with Trump. Inside and outside games reinforce each other in feedback loop, eroding Trump's position. Trump's response is rage and threats. Attacks Republicans who break, questions loyalty, warns about primaries, tries to use fear to maintain discipline, but fact he has to keep threatening own members reveals weakness, not strength. President with true command wouldn't need constant threats. Every angry statement admission that loyalty can't be taken for granted anymore. Walkouts are symbolic, but symbols shape political reality, create images and moments that travel far beyond Capitol. Tell world this president so extreme members of Congress can't show normal respect. Give permission for others to express opposition. Undermine Trump's claims to represent all Americans. Republican defections more significant because threaten actual legislative power, show real limits on what Trump can accomplish. Every break chips away at unity he needs to pass priorities. Midterm elections are key variable explaining everything. Trump understands power depends on Republicans holding Congress. Democratic House means investigations, subpoenas, impeachment. Everything changes. That's why he's furious about defections, why he warns Republicans constantly, why walkouts and protests matter politically. They energize Democratic base, create momentum that carries into elections. Trump's rage is sign of weakness, reveals how precarious position has become. President who truly controlled party wouldn't be so triggered by handful of defections. Rage tells you Trump knows something changed. That deference eroding, that members calculating own interests. Once people see defying Trump possible and sometimes beneficial, defections will accelerate. Next 10 months defined by tension between Trump's desire for control and growing willingness to defy him. More walkouts coming, more protests, more quiet defections, and Trump getting angrier, making more threats, trying to hold coalition through fear. Some will work but trend not in his direction. Cracks growing, resistance getting bolder, midterms getting closer. President who demands total loyalty facing Capitol, where loyalty increasingly conditional, where members calculating survival, where assumption, Republicans fall in line, no longer holds. Capitol not unified against Trump yet, but something shifting. Protests growing, defections accumulating, resistance organizing. Trump cannot stop it. Can only rage and hope that's enough until November. This story continues. Stay tuned.